tell me about Ayn Rand. I know I consider myself, I'm kind of all over the board, libertarian for the most part. But I read Ayn Rand, and I love her philosophy. I love her writing. For instance, Anthem is one of my favorite books. But at the very end, ego, I'm like, I don't connect with that. She has this view that, that charity is not necessarily a virtue, and wanting to give to others unless you choose to, et cetera, et cetera. It seems very selfish. Can you debunk that, or?
Well, sure. Well, on the ego point, think about what makes your life meaningful. If you let other people choose your core values for you, just from simple things, what your musical tastes are going to be, what foods you like, what your clothing style is who your friends are going to be, what your career is going to be, whom you're going to date. None of these things, if they're going to be meaningful, can be done for you. And if you kind of shut down your ego and just let your mom dress you and your dad choose your spouse for you.
I think of royalty.
Yeah, and you like music just because everybody in your social crowd likes that same kind of music. Then you will not have a meaningful life. So I think one of the points that Rand is insisting is on all of the core values, including all of the social values, the things that are socially enriching, friendship, love, business acquaintances, and so forth. The precondition of those things working is that each individual involved has to see the value of it and choose that value for himself or herself.
Correct.
Okay. So I think that's the ego point. Now, the second part of your question, though, is about charity. And I think, according to Rand, charity is a minor situational virtue. And certainly one of the things that's outstanding about her is she's downgrading it from being a major virtue. And in some traditions, of course, it's the primary virtue. But I think the reason for that is that Rand does have a rather optimistic view about human beings, that human beings don't need to be treated like charity cases. And if you think about it, that is a kind of pejorative thing. If I go around in the world saying, I'm looking for ways to find people who need my charity, that's, and I think for most of us who have some measure of self-respect, under what circumstances will you accept charity? It's got to be pretty desperate situations, and you've tried everything that you possibly can not to be putting yourself in a charity situation. So I think part of the assumption is that most human beings can, with effort, make a go of their lives, and they don't need charity. And if you start from that assumption, then you say, what is it that's going to make it possible for people to make a go of their lives? What skills, what habits, what attitudes do we need to encourage in ourselves and in other people? That's going to be the focus of your ethics, not on how can I assume that certain people just can't solve their problems and fix their problems. Right. So, of course, there are going to be some people who fall between the cracks. They have bad luck, they make bad decisions, they're orphans, the zombie apocalypse happens or whatever. Right? And in those cases, absolutely. If you're dealing with a decent person who's had a run of bad luck, that person's your friend or there's some sort of a nonprofit charity out there. Sure, charity, of course.
You're crippling people. You're crippling people when you don't allow them to fail. I mean, Benjamin.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Benjamin Franklin said the best thing you can do is make someone uncomfortable in their poverty.
Right.
And I don't think that is that would be. I think they might stone him to death if somebody said a politician said that today.
Yeah, well, certainly the political ethos has shifted. No, but that point about failure is right. And failure is part of life, and you're not going to be actually living a meaningful life if you're not putting yourself out on the edge and accepting a certain measure of failure. So if from the get-go we say there's not going to be any failure, no matter what happens to you, you're always and automatically and instantly going to be bailed out, well, then you're setting people up for the more general failure of not putting together their own life on their own terms.